background. Tony, however, just signed up, and then the next day at school, Tony said, "Hey, Jeff, I just joined the Army. You should join the Army too. It'll be cool." What Tony didn't tell me is that the recruiters were paying him a little bit of extra money if he could get any of his idiot friends from high school to sign up. And sure enough, Tony convinced me to go to a recruiter's office. Now, it was the middle of the afternoon when I went to the recruiter's office. So yeah, if you're sitting there trying to figure out, does that mean you skipped school to go to talk to the recruiter? Yeah, I probably skipped school. And I went to a recruiter. I'm the only kid in the office that day, basically just me and two Army recruiters, which means I'm like a piece of red meat in front of a couple of wild dogs. And I asked these recruiters, what's the toughest job in the Army? And it was comical, the conversation that started next. Like, I don't come from a military background, so I don't even know what I'm asking. And when I asked this recruiter that I'm standing in front of, what's the toughest job in the Army, he immediately said the Army Rangers. But there was another recruiter across the room that was saying, hey, it's the Special Forces, the Army Green Berets. They're the toughest guys in the military. And I didn't know the difference between Rangers. I'm going to walk around a little bit if that's okay. I didn't know the difference between Rangers and Green Berets. So I'm talking to this recruiter, don't have the first idea what I'm asking about. And I basically say, hey, what's the difference between Army Rangers and Green Berets? True story. I still remember this vividly. He was trying to basically give me a description that would make sense to me. So he said, let me just imagine that we take two groups of guys to the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri. You know this huge arch, right? And we take a squad of Army Rangers, about 10 guys, and we take a Special Forces Alpha team, about 12 guys, and we put them both at the Gateway Arch at the same time, put them at the bottom of the arch, and we tell them to get to the top of the arch. Let me tell you what Army Rangers are going to do, Jeff. They're going to take grappling hooks and knotted hand lines. They're going to do in St. Louis exactly what they did on the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc in Normandy, France on June 6, 1944. They're going to throw those hooks over the top of the Gateway Arch, and those tough dudes will just climb hand over hand to the top. That's Army Rangers. Special Forces guys, the Army's Green Berets, they'll just run inside. You know there's an elevator in the Gateway Arch. They'll just hit the top floor on the elevator button, and they'll take the elevator to the top. That's the difference between the two. And then this recruiter was being really, really honest with me. And he said, listen, kid, I don't think you have any idea what you're asking for. And before you go any further, you need to rethink this. So I want you to go home and I want you to watch this documentary. It's not propaganda made by the military. This is a 2020 documentary about Ranger training. He said, you go home and watch this, and then you come back and talk to me. And basically, this documentary showed Ranger School. And it showed guys that tried the Ranger course. They would all show up to Fort Benning, Georgia. They were some of the toughest, smartest guys in the military that would try Ranger School, and most of them didn't even make it through the first week. They wouldn't make it through the whole 8 or 2-month program. They didn't even make it through the first week. And maybe this recruiter knew what he was doing, because in 5 minutes of watching this documentary, he had me hooked. I thought to myself, man, if it's really, really that tough, I want to try it. And I want to see if I have what it takes to serve with the best of the best. Like one of the members of your church who's sitting right over there, who served in the 3rd Ranger Battalion, one of the toughest assignments in the Army. And I just want to say to you, man, I'm proud of you. And thanks for serving the country. So I go back to the recruiter's office the next day, and I take this documentary back, and I say, hey, man, if it's really this tough, sign me up. I want to become an airborne ranger. Now, I didn't tell the recruiter the second reason why I wanted to join the Army. And I was convinced if he knew the real reason, they wouldn't let me in the Army at all. You see, the second reason that I wanted to join the Ranger Regiment, become a soldier, join the Army, go to the Ranger Regiment, is because I wanted to go to war and I wanted to get shot at, literally. And for me, this goes back to my earliest memory. You see, when I was in the Army later on, after Black Hawk Down, the movie came out, and when people recognized me from the actor who played me in the movie, they would inevitably say, oh, wait a second, hey, you're the guy from the movie Black Hawk Down. And then they would pause in their tracks because I eventually became an Army chaplain. They would recognize my name from the movie, and then they would say, wait a second, are you a chaplain now? What happened to you? Did you get Jesus over there? Is that what happened when you were over in Somalia? And I would tell them all, no, man, I think my story, you misunderstood. My story is the exact opposite. So again, this goes back to my childhood. Because y'all, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I mean, my parents never went to church. I can't think of 2 times in my life where my mother or father, either one of them, went to church if it wasn't for a funeral, the whole time that I was growing up. Nobody talked about Jesus. Nobody prayed. There was no discussion about the Bible in my house. And I grew up in a practically atheist home. And I also grew up with this terrifying fear of dying. And I mean, I don't know how far back this started, but for me, it was a regular occurrence to wake up in the middle of the night as a 10-year-old kid with this sinking feeling in my stomach because I was sitting there thinking to myself, I know I'm going to die one day. Every human being is going to die, but I don't have any idea what happens next. And it freaked me out so bad that I couldn't sleep at night for years. I'd wake my family up. And I'd ask them these questions over and over again because I'm scared of what happens to you after you die, and I don't have any answers. And so I'd ask them, hey, where do you go after you die, and what is it like, and who gets there? Listen to this. My sisters or my mother, I would wake them up at 2 o'clock in the morning, asking them this question again and again and again. And basically, they didn't read the Bible. They didn't go to church. They had no idea how to answer those questions. So when I asked them, where do you go after you die? Their answer was, well, you go to heaven, Jeff. And when I asked them what heaven is like, they told me, I'm not making this up. You float around on clouds and you play harps. And when I asked them who gets to go to heaven, their answer was, everybody goes to heaven. Now, Jeff, leave me alone and go back to sleep because we've been through this again and again and again. Y'all, this went on for me for years until I moved right outside of Nashville, Tennessee at 13 years old. I was a high school student and I moved into an apartment complex. And for whatever reason, the neighbors right across the hall from me in this apartment complex were a brand newly married Christian couple. They were just a few years older than me, and they basically treated me like a little brother. They always wanted to hang out. They wanted to do stuff together. They wanted to play games and have me over at their apartment, and we just hung out with each other for months. No agenda, no real deep conversations. They just wanted to talk, wanted to hang out. And then one night, my mom was late. She was at work, and it was just me and my sister in the apartment. It's probably 8 or 9 o'clock at night when my neighbors come across the hall, and they knock on the door, and they say, hey, Jeff, we really got to talk to you about something. Can we come in for a few minutes? And then they sat down at my dining room table, and they said, there's something really important we need to talk to you about, man. Can we tell you about what we believe? And this couple started, for the first time in my life, this couple started telling me about Jesus. They told me who Jesus was. They described for me what he did on the cross 2,000 years ago. They told me about sin. And then they didn't know me well enough, so there's no way they could know how big of a deal this statement was, but they told me about what happens to you after you die. Basically, what eternity looks like for people that don't know Jesus and don't follow him, and what eternity looks like for people that have been radically changed by Jesus. Now, can I say something to the Christians in the room for just a second? I had a couple of questions because I didn't grow up going to church. So I started asking this couple in this conversation questions that I had about God and about the Bible and about heaven. And I remember once or twice they looked at each other and looked back at me and they were like, we don't know the answers to that question. Like, we'll try to give you the answer, but we don't know the answers to that question. And I'm telling you, when you share Jesus with people, you don't have to know all that. You really aren't expected to know all the answers to the questions. You just got to be real. Because I also remember, and I remember this like it was yesterday, the whole time that they were in my house that night, they were acting weird. They were really nervous. And I know now why they were nervous, but when they were sitting down at the table and talking to me, I kept thinking to myself, like, what's wrong with them? What are they about to tell me? Something bad just happened. Why are they acting so weird right now? So then they finally got to the heart of the issue. They said, Jeff, you're a sinner, and Jesus has already done everything necessary for your sins to be forgiven, and all that it requires of you is that you radically, totally surrender. They stress the part that it has to be a total surrender, and if you will totally surrender to him, he will transform your life. And he will not only, they quoted John 10:10 to me, not only will he give you abundant life right here, right now on planet Earth, he'll give you eternal life. And you don't have to worry about what happens to you after you die. And then check this out, y'all. They were so nervous and so scared that they literally just left it there and ran right back across the hall and went back to their apartment. And they just left me there trying to figure out what to do next. So after the conversation was over with, after they scurried back next door, I started thinking about what they said. And I laid down in bed, and I couldn't get their words out of my mind. The more that I laid there, the more that it made sense to me, like the light just came on. And that night, without anybody leading me, without anybody telling me how to say this or what to do, I just crawled out of my bed, knelt down, and said, God, I'm a sinner, and I can't handle living with this fear anymore. So God, would you forgive me? God, would you change me? And then I crawled back in the bed. Oh, by the way, God, I really mean this. I'm serious. And guys, when I got up the next morning and went to school, there was no question something was different inside of me. Like something happened last night. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something happened. And it was so profound that when I got off the school bus to come home, instead of going to my apartment, I went across the hall to theirs. And I knocked on the door. And I said, hey guys, I heard what you said and I prayed last night and there's something different inside of me and I don't even know what to do next. And they said, Jeff, why don't you start to come to church with us, and why don't we start reading the Bible together, and why don't we teach you a little bit about what it means to follow Jesus? And there's no question at 13 years old that God reached down from heaven and grabbed this kid in the middle of his sin. Thank you, Joe, for pointing out to everybody in the room that I'm a sinner. Reached this kid in the middle of his sin and decided he was going to clean him up and change him. And there was nothing that I brought to the equation other than to just repent and totally trust him. So I'm 18 years old, and I'm in the recruiter's office, and I'm asking this recruiter, send me to the Army and send me to the Ranger Regiment, because I want to see if I can serve, if I have what it takes to be with the best of the best. But in my heart, what I'm thinking is, I need you to send me to war, because I want to know if I'm really over this fear of dying. But if you say that out loud in a recruiter's office, they're going to think you're crazy, and they're probably not going to let you in the Army. So I joined the Army while I was still in high school. I waited around a few months to finish high school, and then I went to basic training. I went to basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia, just a few hours away. That's also the headquarters for the Ranger Regiment. I volunteered to serve in the Ranger Regiment, went through infantry training, went through airborne school, and went straight into the Ranger Regiment, and I started my career as a private in the Ranger Regiment. And to be honest with you, every day that I served in that unit, for almost 16 years in the Army, every day that I served there, I thought to myself, I'm not sure I'm good enough to work with the guys that I'm serving next to, but I'm going to give it everything that I got today, just so that I don't let those guys down. And I still wanted to go to war. I wanted to see if I'm ready to die. So I've been in the Army for a couple of years. In the summer of 1989, when we started to get notified that there was some things going on in Panama, and it looked like we might be sent to combat in the Republic of Panama. Now, let me tell you how old I am. I'm going to date myself for just a second. Back in those days, the special operations community had pagers because there were no such things as cell phones. And there was a special code that went off when you had to carry the pager around with you everywhere you went. Basically, you had to take it everywhere except for the shower. And if this code showed up on the pager, it meant, hey, this is not training. This is for real. Stop everything. Go to work because you're going to war. And several times over the summer and the fall of 1990 or 1989, the pager went off, and I dropped everything and ran back to work and prepared to go to Panama. And then at the last second, and this happened all the time to us, at the last second, the mission got turned off and the plans got scrapped, and go back to what you were doing. Just don't tell anybody what you were planning for. This went on for several months. And it's late December now, and the entire unit is about to sign out on leave and to go home for Christmas. In fact, the next day is the day that we sign out, and everybody goes and travels all over the country and around the world to go be with their families for Christmas. And that morning that we're supposed to sign out, the pagers go off. And this time, it's for real. Because the big boss is supposed to go on vacation today too. Not just us enlisted dudes, but all of the big bosses are going on vacation. And the pager says, drop everything, don't get on the airplanes, get back to work because you're going to war. And sure enough, we start to make plans for the invasion of Panama, what becomes known as Operation Just Cause. So the original plan was to assault the country of Panama with the Ranger Regiment conducting 2 parachute assaults onto airfields. They'll seize these 2 airfields in Torrijos Tocumen and Rio Hato, and then when they held the airfields, the rest of the invasion force will fly in and land at those 2 airfields, and then we'll spread out from there. The night of December 20th, 1989, the night of the invasion, we put more than 140 aircraft in the skies that night. And it was a high probability that some of those aircraft might get shot down. So I showed up to Panama 24 hours before the invasion began and provided the search and rescue force for the entire operation on the night of the invasion for any of the aircraft that went down. After the parachute assault went down, after we started to spread out from there, the first plan for the Ranger Regiment was to go defeat the Panamanian military. But the ultimate plan was to go capture the country's leader. So within a week, we had pretty much defeated the Panamanian Defense Forces. And now the mission becomes to go capture Manuel Noriega, the country's president. And for us, this became what we affectionately called the hunt for Elvis, because he pops up over here and we go chasing after him. And then he finally pops up over here and we go chasing after him. And after 2 weeks, Noriega surrenders. And we have him in custody. And I have been in combat for my first time ever with guys next to me who have combat experience from Vietnam or from the invasion of Grenada in 1983, who are talking me through my first couple of firefights. Jeff, here's what it's like. Here's what to expect. Here's how I want you to react. Don't get overwhelmed by all of the stuff that's blowing up and going off around you. I'm right next to you. And although I got shot at a few times, I never really thought I'm going to die in Panama. So when I got back from the invasion, there was still a big reason why I joined the Army that was unsettled for me. But can I remind all of us of something? I had buddies in Panama who jumped in and were dead by the time that by the time that their parachute hit the ground. They had been shot and killed while they were still jumping in under parachute. And it was a wake-up call for me that life is short and none of us are promised tomorrow. And chances are, if you're like most people, you know that you may not be around tomorrow, but you tend to live like I'm going to be here for the next 30 or 50 years. And as a result, most people leave a lot of things undone, a lot of things unsaid, because we just presume that we've got lots of time to take care of that stuff. And for me, Panama was a wake-up call. It was a reminder. Don't bet on tomorrow, Jeff, because nobody is making you any promises about tomorrow. I'm saying that because if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, man, there's some things that I need to do. There's a conversation that I need to have with somebody. Then go have that conversation tonight because you may not get the chance tomorrow. And there was a conversation that I needed to have, and I knew I needed to have it, but I had been putting it off. And that conversation was with my high school sweetheart. We'd had this long-distance relationship going for a couple of years at this point. And I knew I loved this girl, and I knew I wanted to marry her, but I was dragging my feet. And so when I got back from Panama, the first thing that I did is went out and bought a ring and flew home and proposed. And Dawn and I set a date to get married about a year later. Now, if you know history out there, a year later, the U.S. is involved in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm in Kuwait. I'm in Fort Benning, Georgia. She's halfway across the country in our hometown, and we have taken care of almost all of the preparations. We're just a few weeks away from the wedding day. And basically, you know what that means, ladies, right? Like she's done everything, and I haven't really done anything getting ready for this wedding. And we're just about ready for the wedding day when I convinced my commander to let me make a phone call. I'm in a special operations unit. Everything that we do is clandestine and it's secret. And I let my boss lets me make a phone call over an unsecure phone line. And the phone call basically goes like this. Actually, it was over a payphone right outside of the building that we did business in. And I said, Dawn, I can't tell you where I'm going. I'm not authorized to tell you when I'm leaving, and I don't know when I'm going to get back, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be in the country on our wedding day. And you can hear this long pause on the phone, right? Like all of the work, all of the planning, all of the money that was spent preparing for this wedding that's just around the corner, it all just got scrapped. And after this long pause, she said, Jeff, if you're going off to war again, you need to fly home immediately, and we need to get married right away. And I remember the conversation because I said, okay, first of all, this isn't a secure phone line. And secondly, I never actually used the word war. All I'm saying is I'm not going to be in the country on our wedding day. And she said, Jeff, don't play games with me. I'm not exaggerating. I'm going to quote her right now. She said, don't play games with me, Jeff. If you get killed, I want the flag. So you need to fly home, and we need to get married right away. That's how patriotic my wife is. That woman loves this country. And she said, Jeff, if you get killed, I want the flag. You need to get home, and we need to get married. And I went back and talked to my boss for a second, and I called her back, and I said, yes, ma'am. And I got on a plane. I flew home. I landed in our hometown at about noon. That afternoon, we were walking down the aisle of our family church, getting married, and then got back on a plane and flew back to Fort Benning so that I could go off to Operation Desert Storm in Kuwait with the Ranger Regiment. Now, guys, I got shot at in Kuwait too, but it was nothing like I experienced in Somalia. I think I'm telling you about Panama and Kuwait because when I get to Somalia, this is not my first rodeo. I have been around death, I've been around killing, And I've been to combat more than once at this point, and I kind of know what to expect. But Somalia is different. Man, in Panama, I had people that surrendered by locking themselves in their own handcuffs and turning their weapons into me while they were walking down the road. And in Kuwait, they were giving up or they were bombed into submission before we even got a chance to get on target. So for the most part, there really wasn't much of a battle. When we got to Somalia, they were ready for us. They were waiting for us. In fact, we were greeted the first night with enemy fire every night, almost like clockwork, that we were going to be mortared or rocketed or somebody would assault our compound. And this was the first time in my military career that I found a hardened enemy that was ready to fight and die to kill Americans. Now, can you guys just humor me for a second? How many of you have seen the movie Black Hawk Down? Okay, it's a very realistic movie. At the beginning of the movie, they show you that information on the screen that kind of tells you what's going on in Somalia, but the information doesn't do it justice. There's a drought which caused a famine, and at the point that the U.S. shows up, there's about 350,000 people that have literally starved to death. In December of 1992, the U.S. Marines land on the beaches of Somalia, and the whole plan is for us to give people in Somalia that are dying every day of starvation a chance to survive just one more day by handing out some beans and rice. Look, I need you to know this. You live in a country that doesn't go to war to gain somebody's land or to take over their government or to take their oil. That's not why we went to Somalia. We went to Somalia to give them food and to give them a chance at survival. But Somalia doesn't have a military. They don't have a police force. And there's basically nothing stopping evil men from doing whatever they want to do. So the country was controlled by about 7 warlords. These guys are fighting with one another, trying to become the most powerful man in the land. And they did it by killing off their rivals. And most of those warlords didn't dare stand against the U.S. military, but one of them decided, I'm not only going to kill my rivals, I'm going to kill the United States and the UN. So Mohammed Farah Aidid and his Haber-Getter clan in the spring of 1993 starts to target United States supply convoys as they're delivering food in the country. In the summer of that year, he ambushes the Pakistani United Nations workers and he kills 24 of them in cold blood so that he can take the food and literally starve his enemies into submission. And at this point, the United Nations Security Council comes together and they say, we got to do something about this guy, Aidid. Like, this can't continue. I need to explain this to you because the U.S. military doesn't send the Ranger Regiment to go hand out food to starving people. That's not the mission of the Ranger Regiment. When the United Nations decides we're going to do something about Aidid, we're going to go kill this guy or we're going to capture him, but we're not going to let this thing stand, that's when the U.S. assembles Task Force Ranger. Now, this was a company of Rangers from Fort Benning, Georgia. It was a helicopter unit with a very incredible Black Hawk pilot from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. A Black Hawk pilot you may have heard of. His name is Mike Durant. And it was some special operations soldiers from all branches of the military up and down the East Coast. We all got together. We had just a couple of days' notice. And the plan was, we're going to Somalia. We're not there to hand out food. We're going to kill or capture Aidid and everybody in his organization. So we show up and we start to systematically target all of the high-ranking leaders from the Aidid clan. We thought we would be there for about 6 weeks. We're 3 months into this, and we still haven't got Aidid, and we still haven't got a couple of the big bosses. We've got most of them, but we don't have the last couple of guys, and we don't have Aidid. And every day that we're there, this mission becomes a little bit more dangerous. My job in Somalia, I'm a 24-year-old squad leader. I've got 10 men that I'm responsible for, and my job is to be the lead Humvees in and out of the streets. Every mission that Task Force Ranger did, we put guys in by helicopter and we put guys in by Humvees, and generally the Humvees brought everybody out. This is typically how we did business in there. So my job was to be the first Humvee in, and usually the first or the last Humvee out of the target every time we launched to go kill some bad guys. We get a tip on Sunday afternoon. If you're watching the movie and you know anything about special operations, you ought to ask yourself, like, this doesn't make sense. Why would we do this mission at that time of day? Well, there's two reasons. One, we got a tip. It's Sunday afternoon. I had been out there playing volleyball in some shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops when I got a call that said, hey, two of the really high-profile guys are meeting in the same building at the same time. At this point, that's never happened. It's always been one guy here and one guy over there. But we've got two of the big bosses in the same building at the same time. Unfortunately, these two guys are meeting in the very part of town that's controlled by ID, meaning we're going to have to go into his front door to get these two guys. And that's reason number one. Reason number two is because we've been over there for months longer than we planned to be over there. And President Clinton is getting hammered in the news about Somalia at this point. The news is starting to call Somalia another Vietnam. And we're getting a lot of pressure from Washington, D.C. to wrap this thing up and to get out of there. So our big boss, Major General William Garrison, has a decision to make. And he decides at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, okay, we're going to launch a daylight raid in the heart of town. Like, this is the most dangerous circumstances that you can come up with, but we're going to go in there right in his front door in broad daylight, and we're going to go get these two guys. And so just like you see in the movie Black Hawk Down, special operators fly in on little birds, and they assault the target from the rooftops. Rangers go in by Black Hawks, and they slide down 4 ropes and to the 4 corners of the target building. Their job is to provide security right around the target building and to make sure that nobody gets in the building until those special operators are done doing business. And while all of that is going on, I lead a long column of about 12 Humvees through the city streets. The plan is we're going to wait about a half a block away. We will arrive when the last Black Hawk is pulling out of the target building. We'll be about a half a block away. We will wait for the call that they've got the bad guys in their control, the building is secure, and everybody is ready to go. And we'll drive up the last half block, and we'll get everybody who went in by helicopter and all of the bad guys on those vehicles, and we want to get out of there in less than 30 minutes. The plan is get out in less than 30 minutes, or else this is going to get ugly. What we didn't expect, we were prepared for, but we didn't see this one coming, is when the Black Hawks were flying in, when the Rangers were sliding down the rope, Todd Blackburn missed the fast rope, and he fell about 70 feet. And because of all of the equipment that he was wearing, he landed headfirst in the city streets. So as soon as I got there, my commander, Colonel Danny McKnight, was calling me on the radio, saying, Jeff, we got a seriously wounded Ranger. I need you to get him on your Humvees, and I need you to take him back to our surgeon and get him immediate medical attention. Now, I'm already under gunfire. As soon as I arrived into our little position, I'm immediately under gunfire. So I had to fight my way up to Blackburn, and I had to put him on a stretcher. He was already unconscious. He had a couple of special operations medics working on him, trying to keep him alive. And we put him on one of our cargo Humvees. I want you to think about it like a pickup truck. So there's no protection around him, just these two guys trying to keep him alive. And then I split my squad in half and put half of my men on the Humvee in front of them and the rest of my men on a Humvee behind them. And we're going to provide some protection, just some guns that will get them out of the target building. I called back to Colonel McKnight, and I told him, hey, I've got Blackburn on the vehicles. I'm going to drive back to the base. I'll drop him off. I'm going to turn around, and I'm going to get back out here as fast as I can. But I'm fighting at this point already, just trying to get them on the vehicles. And I'm driving down a narrow alleyway next to the Target building. I'm on the first Humvee. Blackburn is in the vehicle behind me, and the rest of my men are on a vehicle behind him. And we're going pretty slow because Blackburn is pretty seriously injured with some head and neck injuries, and I don't want to make those injuries worse. So I tell the dude who's driving my Humvee to go pretty slowly and to avoid all of the potholes. We drive down a narrow alleyway next to the Target building, and then I turn onto one of the only major roads in Somalia. And when I say major road, I want you to think about it like this size of the building is the size of that road. And guys, when I turned that corner, those 3 Humvees got hit with enemy fire from 100 directions at the same time. And most of it was 10 feet away. There were guys on rooftops that were just lobbing hand grenades at us because it was that easy to hit these Humvees. And there were rocket-propelled grenades that were coming across both sides of the street at us. And every doorway, every window, there were automatic weapons pointed at us, and we were just getting hammered from every direction. I had a guy on a .50 caliber machine gun on top of my Humvee that was holding the trigger down and trying to return fire all of these different directions. And he wasn't able to really hit anybody that way. So I told him to take his machine gun, face the left side of the Humvee, pick up all of the bad guys on the left side, and do his best to try to keep us alive just long enough to make it to the next city block. If any warriors in this room, you know what this is like. This is you fighting just for the next minute, not for the rest of the night or even for the rest of the operation. I'm just trying to make it to the next block, let alone make it back to the base. There's another guy sitting right behind me with a machine gun. I've seen a lot of machine gunners in my life, but I've never seen one that is better than Dominic Pilla. And he's sitting right behind me, so I told Pilla, take your machine gun, face the right side of the Humvee, pick up all the bad guys on the right. I'll take care of everybody in front of the Humvees. Another guy in the back will take care of all of the bad guys behind us, and now, guys, we're just fighting for one another and fighting for our lives. Down the road on the right side of the Humvee is a Somali gunman. And when we got next to him, I couldn't see him because he was hiding. But when we got right next to him, he saw Dominic Pilla at the same time that Pilla saw him. And I'll spare you, especially you ladies in this room, the gruesome details. But they killed each other at the exact same moment. And Pilla was shot in the forehead. He took a massive head wound, and he was dead before his body hit the ground. He fell over into the lap of specialist Tim Moynihan. And then Moynihan began to panic, and everybody in those Humvees started to panic because all of us realized we're not going to make it out of here alive. Moynihan started to scream out to me, Sergeant Struecker, Pilla's dead. He's been shot. And when I looked over my shoulder, it was like the whole back of that Humvee just got painted red. And I had to remind myself, Jeff, you're a leader, and you're in charge of this mission. And Jeff, you've got to get yourself under control if you're going to get your men under control. So as calmly as I could, I told Tim Moynihan to take his weapon, face the right side of the Humvee, pick up Dominic Pilla's sector of fire, and kill as many bad guys as possible if we're going to have any chance of making it out of here alive. We fight our way back to the base. I don't have time to tell you what it took to get back there. But when I got back to the base that night, it was total chaos. The medics were running to my Humvee to pull Dominic Pilla's dead body off of the back, and the surgeon was running to get to Todd Blackburn. People were scurrying everywhere. My vehicle's already shot to pieces, and I remember leaning over the hood and thinking, God, I can't believe that I just came out of there alive. Like all of us should be dead right now. And at this point, all that I know is this is about the most brutal fight that I've ever been in my life. When my platoon leader, who was out on another mission when we launched to go get these bad guys, he walks up to me, and Lieutenant Larry Moores says, hey, Jeff, 2 Black Hawk helicopters just got shot down. We've already put the search and rescue force at the first crash site. Now, Mike Durant is crashed in the city, and we don't have anybody else left to go out there. So Jeff, I need you to get your men and put them back on the Humvees, and I need you to go out to the Durant crash site. If you have had a chance to hear my podcast, I had a chance to interview Mike Durant just last week, and we told some stories about that fight that he and I was in when I tried to fight my way to him and to get him before he fell into enemy hands and spent 11 days as a POW in Somalia. I am thinking to myself, if I go back out in those city streets, I know I'm going to die. And in fact, just like you see in the movie Black Hawk Down, one of those special operators who came back with me, he said, "Hey, Sergeant, if you're really going to go back out there tonight, man, don't leave your men sitting in the back of that Humvee and all of that blood. Like, that's going to really mess them up tonight. So you should probably go clean that Humvee up." And I sent all the rest of my guys. As a squad leader, I'm getting them ready to go back out in the city streets. So I send them out to get some more ammunition, go get some more fuel, get the vehicles ready to go. And I pulled this one Humvee off to the side, and we didn't have running water. So I'm just using buckets and my bare hands. And I'm cleaning Dominic Pilla's blood off of the back of this Humvee. And folks, this is the most terrifying moment of my life. Hands down. There isn't even a close second. See, at the back of this Humvee, I'm thinking to myself, God, I've already lost one of my men. I don't know if anybody has died at the crash sites. This is the only guy that I know of that's killed in action from our unit in Somalia. And if I drive my men back through that, there's going to be 10 more dead tomorrow morning. And I was thinking about my men, and I was thinking, this is a suicide mission. I'm not sure I'm ready to do this. And I was thinking about my wife, because we've been married now for a couple of years, been trying the whole time to have a baby. And I got a letter in the mail right after getting to Somalia saying that she was pregnant with our first child. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to see my wife again, and my child will never even see their father's face. And everything inside of me was saying, don't do this. Don't go out there. But one of the things that makes Rangers special, there's several things that make Rangers special, but one of the things that make them special is the vow that they make to one another. They do it almost daily when they pledge their lives to one another in what's called the Ranger Creed. And you know this stanza that says, "I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy." And I'm at the back of this Humvee, and I'm thinking, if I go out there, I'm going to die. And if I don't go out there, a fallen comrade is going to fall into the hands of the enemy. And I'm scared, and I don't want to do this. And at the back of that Humvee, I started to pray. Now, guys, I didn't negotiate with God. This isn't one of those, God, if you get me out of here, I'll do whatever you ask me to do next. This was just a prayer of desperation. God, I'm in trouble. God, I'm scared. God, I need your help. And at that moment, he started to remind me of something that I had been reading in the Bible just a couple of days earlier. I did my devotions every single day while I was in Somalia. Got up early, read the Bible, then took my men out for some exercise in the morning before we went out to kill bad guys. And a few days earlier, I'd been reading the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. You guys remember this story? The night before he gets convicted and sent to the cross, he knows exactly what he's going to go through. And he's scared, and he's hurting. And I remember thinking about Jesus in this garden when he says, Father, if there is any way possible, let this cup pass from me. He's basically saying, God, I don't want to do this. At the back of that Humvee, I started to pray, God, if there is any way possible, let this thing pass from me. I don't want to go back out there. I'm scared. And then I remember the words that Jesus spoke next, like he was whispering them right into my ears in Somalia when he said, not my will, but yours be done. And then the Son of God walks into the hands of the enemy and gives his life up freely so that your sin and mine could be paid for. And I'm at the back of this Humvee, and I prayed, God, I don't want to go back out there tonight. I'm scared. But not my will, your will be done tonight. Whatever you want to happen next, God, I'm placing my life in your hands. And y'all, I've never really heard an audible voice from God. But there was a moment at the back of that Humvee where I just felt this overwhelming sense like there's only one of two ways this thing is going to go down tonight, Jeff. If by some miracle God chooses to spare my life, I go home to Fort Benning, Georgia. I go home to my wife and our baby that's on the way. That's one possibility. But the only other option here is that tonight is the night that I take a bullet in the forehead, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, before my body hits the ground, I know exactly where I'm going to spend eternity. I know where my soul's going to be. And guys, I wish I could bring you with me to this spot on the airfield in Mogadishu, Somalia, where I'm praying, God, I'm scared. God, I need your help. Because he kind of revealed it to me this way. Either I go home to my family in Georgia, or I go home to my Father in heaven. But no matter what happens next, tonight I cannot lose because of what Jesus has done for me 2,000 years ago. And man, that for me was like a moment when the switch just got flipped. And for the whole rest of the night, I'm 100% certain I'm going to die and have no fear about it whatsoever. Like, get back on those Humvees and drive back out into the city streets, taking guys with me. All of our shooters were already on the city streets fighting for their life, and we need more guns. So I grabbed the cooks. I grabbed the supply clerks. I had the intel dude and the ammunition specialist on the vehicles with me. Like, if you got a gun, get on the vehicles because we need every gun that we can get. I got the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker when we start to roll back out into the city streets to try to get to Mike Durant. And I've got an airplane, a helicopter that's in the sky that's giving me directions. I'm the lead Humvee, and he's basically telling me where Durant's helicopter went down. I can't see it, but he's giving me instructions. So he says basically, hey, go down this road, take a left, you'll see some tires burning in front of you, make a right turn at the burning tires, and you'll go straight to the Durant crash site. I know what burning tires means. You can see the black smoke from burning tires through the whole city during the day, and at night you can see the flames. And burning tires means, hey, there's a big fight here. If you want to kill Americans, come to the burning tires. And the helicopter says, just go to the burning tires and take a right. You can't miss it. What the helicopter can't see is right before we get to the burning tires, there's a handful of Somali gunmen that are hiding on the side of the road waiting for us. And when we get right next to them, they open up on my Humvees and engage it with rocket-propelled grenades and automatic gunfire from 5 feet away. And I cannot explain how this is even possible, but not one guy on my Humvee is hit in that exchange of gunfire. We backed out of there, and I called back up to the helicopter and said, man, I can't drive cooks and clerks through that. We're going to kill more guys than we'll rescue. You need to find us another route. And as I was driving around the city, I linked up with some of our guys that were trying to make their way back to the base, stopped what we were doing, grabbed all of them, all of the dead bodies, all of the wounded, put them on our Humvees, and I take them back to the base, drop them off, and I start to turn around to go back out there a third time. And this is when my boss says, we can't keep sending these Humvees without any armor or any protection on those vehicles out there. We need some armored vehicles. And so we asked the United Nations for help. That rain is there for dramatic effect. The Pakistanis came with 2 of their tanks. And the Malaysian commander showed up with his armored personnel carrier. Listen to this guy. He says, whatever you want from us, it's yours. And the Malaysians fight next to us all night long. You need to know something about these Malaysians. 2 of those men died on the city streets right next to us from Malaysia, trying to get our men on those armored personnel carriers and get back to the base. And the Malaysian commander said to me, we would not do this for any country on earth except for the United States. These are the first 2 Malaysians killed in combat since World War II. And we would not do this for anybody else on earth except for the U.S. And we were honored to serve next to you. I drive back out into those city streets in the same Humvees, 3 of the 4 tires already shot flat underneath me. And I stay out there until 9 o'clock the next morning. I'm literally the last vehicle to leave. And I drive my buddies back to the base. And when I get back to the base the next morning, my friends, these tough, battle-hardened Rangers, are waiting for me. Now, up to this point, all that I ever wanted to do with the rest of my life was be a Ranger. I thought, God, this is why you made me. I'm going to kick in doors. I'm going to kill bad guys. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. They're going to have to force me out of the Army. And then when I get back to the base, my men are waiting for me. My buddies who I've been trying to talk to about Jesus for weeks or months are waiting for me. And they said, Jeff, I need to talk to you right now. You see, Jeff, my buddy just got killed on those helicopters. And I don't know where he is now, Jeff. So what happens to you after you die? Where do you go? And what is it like? And several of them said, hey, this mission is far from over. What happens to me if I get on a helicopter or a Humvee and I get killed? Jeff, I need some answers. And what I watched last night, Jeff, when everyone else in the city streets was totally freaking out, you looked like you were completely calm. I listened to your voice over the radio and everybody else is terrified and you sounded like you were totally calm. I don't even know how that's possible, but all I know is you've got something, Jeff, and whatever it is, I want it. So the very next day, I'm telling my friends about Jesus and how much of a difference a genuine faith in Jesus makes when you're confronting death and it looks like it's imminent. And more than a few of those guys have surrendered their soul to Jesus and he's radically changed them. In fact, I'm proud to say almost every one of them have. And there's a moment on this airfield where I felt God say in an overwhelmingly clear way to me, Jeff, I want you to do something more than just sling lead with bad guys. I want you to do something that matters for eternity. I want you to reach Rangers at their soul level. And that set me on a path to become an Army chaplain and to spend the last 10 years of my career in the Army as a chaplain, most of it in the Ranger Regiment. Now listen to these numbers. In the last 10 years, I went to Afghanistan 9 times and Iraq 5 times. And I stood right next to Rangers and I could look them in the eyes and say, guys, I know what you're going through. I've been there personally and I am living proof that a genuine faith in Jesus will radically change the way that you fight. I came here tonight not just because I have the greatest respect for Joe Bailey. I do. And I'm proud to be able to stand next to him in this church. But I came here tonight because I want you to experience real freedom. I'm talking right now to somebody who might be watching by Twitter or watching on Facebook. And if you're thinking to yourself, man, I live in the United States, I'm in the freest country that's ever existed on planet Earth, that sounds very familiar to me. It sounds a little bit like John chapter 8, when Jesus says, if the Son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. And all of the Jews who heard that statement said, what are you talking about, Jesus? We're descendants of Abraham. We were free because we were born into Abraham's family. And Jesus said, I don't think you understand what I'm talking about. I'm talking about setting you free at the soul level. I'm not talking about the country you live in or the family that you were born into. I'm talking about setting you free from yourself and from your sin. And I am living proof that the radical faith in Jesus Christ is so powerful, so profound, that you can face death like it's right around the corner, and you can face it without fear. And when you've got that kind of freedom, you can face anything next. I'm talking to brothers and sisters in this room who have this solid faith in Jesus Christ. There's nothing special about my faith. What's special is the God that I believe in. And when you believe in that powerful creator God who loves you enough that he would sacrifice his own son for you, and you get some bad news tomorrow in the doctor's office, or you hear something from a family member that just devastates you and you're terrified and you don't know how to handle it, I want to remind you that even though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you have nothing to fear. Listen to David's words, because he's with you in that valley. And he will walk with you, and he will anoint your head, and he will prepare a table before you in that valley, and you got nothing to fear, even when the worst possible circumstances are right in front of your face, because he says, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I've got you in the palm of my hand, and no one can snatch you out. And maybe somebody who's watching this online has never got that kind of freedom. I want you to have that kind of freedom. That doesn't come from being a citizen of the United States. It doesn't come from going to church. It doesn't come from being born into a Christian family. That comes from when God sets you free from yourself. And he does that through this radical transaction of you surrendering your soul to Jesus and he cleaning it up and turning you into somebody new. So if you guys don't mind, on this Memorial Day weekend, can I just say a prayer for all of us? First, that God's children will live so bold, so profound, that your neighbors will say, man, you got something, and I don't even know what it is, but I know I want it. And secondly, for somebody who's watching this on Twitter or on Facebook or in this room, to say, I want that kind of freedom. I don't have it. I've been to church, I've heard about Jesus, but I don't have that, and I want that. And maybe tonight's the night that God does for you what he did for me at 13 years old. So can I just pray for you right now? And then I'm going to turn things back over to Joe. Father, thank you for the folks that came tonight. They took the time out of their schedule to be here and even went through the rain. Some of them drove for an hour to be here tonight. And God, I hope that you've encouraged them. I hope that what they've heard has been a blessing to them because they took this sacrifice to be here. But God, I don't believe it's an accident that you brought people here, or those that are tuned in online right now. I don't think this is an accident that they're watching this broadcast. And maybe tonight is the night that you want to radically change somebody's soul. Maybe there's a guy or a gal who's gone to church, who's heard the gospel, who's prayed a prayer before. But the truth is, it's never really impacted them because they were never really radically, totally serious about it. Maybe tonight's the night that they need to make this absolute surrender. Like Jesus, no matter what it costs me, no matter where I have to go, no matter what I have to give up, tonight is the night that I am turning it all over to you. I'm turning from my sin and I'm turning to you because I'm sick and tired of living this way. And I need you to change me. And God, if somebody is in that desperate state right now, I'm asking that your Spirit would come and help them to genuinely turn from their sins and to turn to you and to say, from this point forward, you're my King, you're my Lord. I follow you, I'll go anywhere you ask me to go. I just am asking you, would you change me? Would you clean me up? Would you make me into somebody new? Because I don't want to live like this anymore. And God, I know that when that prayer is real, when it comes from a sincere heart, I know you hear that prayer from heaven, and I know that you honor it. And you do this miracle above all miracles by taking a dead man or a dead woman and making them alive in Christ for the first time. So God, I'm asking you for you to do that miracle for somebody who's crying out this prayer of desperation right now. But I'm praying for my brothers and sisters who are watching this online or in this room. I'm praying, God, that they would be so bold, that they would live with this profound sense of peace, that they would have this rock-solid assurance, and they would live so different that their friends or their schoolmates or their coworkers would say, man, you got something. I don't even know what it is, but I know I want what you got. And you use the people from this church to transform Northern Alabama, to transform the country and the world, because the gospel has taken root in their hearts, and it's so profound that their neighbors or their coworkers or their family members see it, and they want what they've got. So God, would you do what only you can do, and would you get the glory for this thing tonight? In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks you guys for the chance to be here. Joe, thank you for the opportunity, and God bless you guys.
All right. I told my people, I told y'all he'd be awesome. He is, I don't know. He, again, just is so humble, and everything about him is